Okay, in 2 seconds we are live.
The PDF is not full screen.
That's okay.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Climate Change Challenge. And today we have the final session of our expert discussion series. I'm Somdata, and today I have Dr. Geeta Ramaswamy from Nature Conservation Foundation to discuss citizen science with us. Citizen science. Now, this the word citizen in it and there's science in it. So citizens is basically all of us, you, me, everybody around us. And science is something that we tend to think of as what we study in our classrooms, something which probably happens in huge labs and not something that everybody has access to. We think of big machines and stuff like that. So how can all of us, how can all citizens become a part of citizen science? How are we going to connect the two concepts together is what Geeta is going to tell us today. And we, of course, because this discussion is a part of the climate change challenge, we are going to discuss how citizen science initiatives can also help in our understanding of climate and climate crisis. So, Geeta, let me come to you now. So tell me, Geeta, what is citizen science? Let's first discuss what this concept is, and who basically can become a part of citizen science. How much training do we need to be participating in citizen science?
Hi, Somdata. Thanks so much for inviting me to this forum and for providing me this audience to interact with. I'm very glad to be here and thanks for the opportunity. So citizen science is science that is practiced by non-professional scientists. So if you go to the next slide, you can see the definition of citizen science on this presentation. So anyone who has an interest in answering a scientific question by following a certain protocol with the common goal of contributing information, gathering information, analyzing it, and visualizing it in such a way that it answers that scientific problem is known as citizen science. So initially, citizen science came about to make science more responsive to citizens' needs, which is scientists sometimes, they get stuck in this esoteric ideas and they keep exploring certain lines of exploration and never come out of it, which may or may not directly benefit citizens. So this is one way of making science accessible to everybody, and especially in order to address their needs. Mm-hmm. The other thing that citizen science does is that it produces lots and lots of scientific knowledge. Mm-hmm. It contributes lots of information to understanding certain types of problems in the world better. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's citizen science.
Okay, so then how much training do you think somebody needs to become a part of citizen science initiatives?
As long as one is aware of the protocol, anyone can do it. So the training per se is basically just to understand the protocol. Now, if you go to the next slide, there are several levels at which somebody can engage with citizen science. So there are three types of citizen science projects. There are contributory citizen science. There's contributory citizen science, which is basically a scientist thinks of a problem and the scientist presents it to the world, and anyone in the world can contribute information by following protocol. So the training here is basically just to learn the protocol, and the citizen scientist just needs that much training. The second type of citizen science project is a collaboratory type of project, where a scientist may think of a problem, but the citizens will contribute at multiple levels of the project. So they could contribute at the level of designing the way in which the data will be collected. They could collect the data itself. They could contribute during the analysis and inference stage. They could help in collating all that information into something that's meaningful, right? So that's the second level of interaction. And this will require a little bit more of training. So a citizen may have to be trained in a certain sense to be able to contribute to this type of a citizen science project. The third type of project is the most inclusive of all. It's called a co-created project, where any citizen who has a scientific problem in mind collaborates with scientists. Together, they think of the problem, they think of the way in which this problem can be dealt with, they think of the way in which data would be collected to address the problem, they collect the data together, they analyze it together, and they compile all the information that's got towards the goal of answering the question that was raised together. So a co-creative type of citizen science is the most inclusive type of citizen science, and we may imagine that everybody who is involved in such a intensive type of a project will require training in various stages. So it could be training in how to ask a scientific question, how to collect information, how to design a study, how to write it up, how to frame it as a policy if you want to make a policy change, and so on and so forth. So depending on what level of citizen science you're doing, the amount of training that goes into it may be more.
All right. So, Geeta, tell me, tell our audience also, like, what are the kinds of things, tangible things that can be studied through citizen science? Maybe some of the examples that people have already studied.
Right. So, firstly, not every type of scientific problem can be addressed using citizen science. So, for example, if your scientific problem requires the use of an electron microscope, that is likely to be found only in certain types of scientific facilities. It's not accessible to everyone. So a project that involves the use of an electron microscope will not be it will not lend itself to being a very good citizen science project. However, when the information that is sought is available to everyone, that people are in close proximity to the information and it's available everywhere, then that's a better type of project for a citizen science project. So if you can go to the next slide, I'll show you some kinds of examples.
Just a second. I am also putting a Google form out there for our audience to start thinking of what kinds of projects they can become a part of. Yeah, Geeta.
Right. So citizen science is great for when lots of information is required for something over large spatial scales, over lots of space, or over very long periods of time. And this is because scientists themselves can't be everywhere, and but they need information which is there everywhere. So this is the very a perfect type of a project to become a citizen science project. So if you look on your screen, there are two pictures. The one on top is from a citizen science project called iNaturalist. It's a project where you can upload, you have to register with the project, and then you can upload photographs of any type of biodiversity that you see around you. So this particular example is for the Bengal monitor lizard, sorry. And if you see the pixels on India, that's where Bengal monitor lizard has been monitored, or data on this species has been contributed to the project. So you can see the scale at which the information is collected. It's very large scale. It's at the scale of the entire country. Right? So citizen science is great for projects that require inventorying of biodiversity. Especially
So
things
a project like this can can involve citizens in going and reporting that, hey, I have seen a Bengal monitor lizard in this area, and they put it up on the app, and this information becomes accessible to all of us, researchers, non-researchers, anybody, policymakers, and they can, I mean, if they're interested in looking at Bengal monitor lizard, then they know where all it is found.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
So there's also an India version of this this type of observation. It's called the India Biodiversity Portal. I'll come to that in a bit. So the idea behind these types of citizen sciences to create an inventory. So we know where species are, how easy they are to detect from a particular place, and so on. Some of this type of information has also helped in revising what was earlier known. So, for example, people have used information from citizen science portals to, tweak the known ranges of species like birds. So earlier, birds were, given a range which could be vague. Based on local reports, etc. But now there's a more precise way of estimating where birds are found. using ranges that are reported in something like a citizen science project. Yeah, and over the other thing is, over time, when we collect lots and lots of information again and again, over time we are able to build our understanding of seasonality. Seasonality is basically how something changes with the seasons. Seasons are again dependent on how the Earth moves around the sun, and lots of life cycle. The life cycles of many organisms are linked to how the seasons change. So, for example, this second example over here is from eBird, and the green little bumps that you see against, the lines against the species names is basically when that species was recorded. So it gives, so if it's there throughout, means it's not a seasonal bird, it's there throughout. But if you see it only during certain times of the year, it'll show up as blips during those times of the year. So it's great for studying something like seasonality.
I see.
So yeah, so I would say that citizen science is great for observing and recording biodiversity, asking questions about biodiversity and ecology over large scales and over long periods of time.
Very interesting. So you talked about seasonality, and that probably brings me to the next question, which is around what you do at the Nature Conservation Foundation and the initiative that you run there, Season Watch. So can you tell our audience a bit more about what Season Watch is and how it runs and functions and what it aims to achieve?
Sure. So if you can go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, a quick look at the other citizen science projects also that are there in India.
Yeah.
All of these are Googleable, and you can just look them up. That's the first one over there is India Biodiversity Portal, where you can contribute information on plants, animals, fungi, any living thing that you find in India. You might have heard of Bird Count India, which is part of the larger eBird group, eBird project, and looks at how many birds, what kinds of birds are observed across the country. There's iNaturalist. There's also platforms that let you monitor and upload information on butterflies and moths that are found in India. A great link to keep in mind is this citsciindia.org. They keep updating the list of the most recent citizen science projects in India. So to keep a watch over this particular link over here. And what we do at Season Watch is linked to how how organisms react to changes in the seasons. But before that, a little bit of background. So how animals and plants react to changes in the seasons, the study of something like this is called phenology. These are cyclical changes, and these need not just be restricted to an annual scale, but at the life scale as well. So, for example, plants become seedlings from seeds, they become saplings from seedlings, then they become adult plants. Once they're adult plants, they produce flowers, they produce fruits, and produce seeds again, which starts the cycle again. So the study of these cyclical changes that come in organisms is known as phenology. And phenology is usually very nicely attuned to the climatic factors. So things like temperature, rainfall, day length, these kinds of things can very easily affect phenology. So phenology is a great way to detect how the climate itself is changing by comparing how plants are behaving now to a historical sort of baseline. So if you see this particular slide, this is a map of the US and a project called the USA National Phenology Network, which combines information that is collected by mainstream scientific labs on phenology of plants and combines that with citizen science data that is collected from across the country to understand how plants are changing over time and whether that is linked to climate change. So in this particular map, what you're seeing is a whole bunch of red areas. Those are areas where plants put out leaves much before than expected, up to 20 days before expected this year, till September 17, 2020, right? and the blue areas indicates all those plants which put out leaves after they were expected to put out leaves, up to 20 days later than what they are expected to do.
Mm-hmm.
So something like this is very good indicator of, okay, plants are changing because the seasons overall are changing, and this could have a connection to uh, climate change overall. So this is how phenology helps us understand climate change. So with the same kind of goal, we want to study phenology in India. But in India, there's a problem. We are mostly a tropical country,
Mm-hmm.
and unlike the US, which has temperate sort of climate in most of the places, there's a distinct growing season for plants over there. But in India, in most places, there's no distinct growing season.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much throughout the year, there is light. Pretty much throughout the year, it's warm. So it's great for plants to grow throughout the year. So how do we now understand how plants here are behaving uh, in response to the changing seasons and then eventually in response to the changing climate? So this is the goal of Season Watch, primarily to understand how tropical tree species are responding to changing climates and eventually how that will get affected by climate change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, Geeta,
So
tell
in
me one thing. So, if you're looking into into the seasonality, I mean, let's say the season in which a particular tree flowers, then you're probably comparing it with historical data that has been there. So, how do you find? I mean, let's say I want to talk about the mango tree in my backyard, and how do I know how this mango tree behaved, let's say 100 years back, 20 years back, what it is doing now, and what it will do in the coming 20 years and 50 years? So, how does one go about these things?
Right. So, in the temperate countries, in places like the US, in Europe, people have had extremely long-term records already. So, since let's say 100 or 150 years, people have already recognized the need to maintain records
Mm-hmm.
for phenology of plants. But that is because they have a distinct growing season there. So, it's intimately linked to when they can sow their crops and when those crops are likely to grow, etc. But those kinds of records are not easy to find in tropical countries where the growing season is pretty much throughout the year. So we don't have any written records. But what we do have is cultural, potentially references which are based in cultural practices, where
Mm-hmm.
certain types of plants are used for certain types of cultural activities, and people can then notice shifts in those in the changes that occur in those plant parts.
Mm-hmm.
I'll actually give you an example. It's coming up a little bit later in this presentation about
Mm-hmm.
how we used cultural baseline to understand shift in phenology of a particular tree species.
But then it is very relevant for our audience also to understand that these kinds of recordings of our natural resources and nature around us has not happened in India as much as in the other countries, and probably that's one big area that is still remaining to be explored and worked upon, and hopefully some of our climate warriors that will come out of climate change challenge will feel enthused about starting some of those initiatives, hopefully.
Right, right. Actually, it's not like we don't have records. We have records, which might be not continuous. So there might be sparse records for shorter periods of time. The other thing is that lots of information is buried in resources which are not available to everyone. So you might find phenology information in regional floras.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder how many people have heard of a regional flora, right? Flora is a compendium of plants that you find in a region, but many people don't know that such documents exist.
Correct.
So all this information is maybe there, but it's buried in places where people have no access to it.
I see.
So yeah, so this citizen science is a great way to also bring out that information, make it accessible to everyone.
So tell me, so what are the kind of people that you work with at Season Watch, and how do you train them into into collecting data? Do they also analyze data for you? And if they do, then how do they do it?
Right. So can we go to the next slide?
Sure.
Right. So, Season Watch is an India-wide project. We have two types of contributors. We have individuals. Individual is anyone who is interested in natural history, in plants, trees, in ideas of exploring seasons and climate change. Anyone who is interested. The other group of contributors we have are schools. So, schools are basically groups of students who are led by a teacher and they collect information. So, we have these two broad types of contributors. And over the past 10 years, Season Watch began in 2010. More than 1,100 individuals and 1,100 schools have contributed information to Season Watch on more than 88,000 trees, and we now have a database of about more than 4 lakh observations. And if you see on the map, it shows the location of all the trees that have been recorded as part of Season Watch across the country. And if you see, most of them are clustered in Kerala. So most of our information, nearly 85% of our information comes from the state of Kerala, where nearly 50% of the schools that contribute are based in, and they contribute information on many, many thousands of trees in one go. And how they contribute the information is either using our website, which is www.seasonwatch.in, or our freely downloadable Android app, which is available on Google Play Store. So typically, how do people get to know what they have to observe, right? So for that, we usually have facilitative workshops where we go and train people who would either themselves collect information or train other people who will collect information. So if you can go to the next slide, I'll tell you what we teach them. So we give a background about what is phenology. We talk about the common trees that people have seen around them. We ask them about their ideas of what is a season, how do seasons change, whether they notice the trees change with seasons. And invariably, people notice that trees change with seasons, and trees are a great indicator of how the season is turning over. We then train them in how to observe a given tree. So, how one does that is, because the tree is a sort of an amorphous shape, one imagines the tree to be a circle. So, if you can just go to the next slide. So, for example, this is a tree. This is a beautiful tree called Butea monosperma, or the flame of the forest. It's called so because when it flowers, you can see only the red colored, scarlet colored flowers, and there'll be no leaves. And it really looks stark and beautiful against a dry landscape when it
This is
typically flowers.
Palash, isn't it?
Yes, that's Palash, correct.
Yeah.
Palash. So if you were to monitor this Palash tree, you would imagine actually it to be a circle, this big yellow circle, and then you would divide it into thirds, into three equal parts. And in each of these parts, you would try to make an assessment of a phenophase. A phenophase is nothing but the phenological stage. It's basically leaves, flowers, and fruits. And within leaves, we have young leaves, mature leaves, dying leaves. Within flowers, we have buds and open flowers. Within fruits, we have ripe fruits and unripe and ripe fruits. So you make an assessment within each of these thirds how, if even if a single one of these phenophases is present, so you would mark it as if it's absent. Sorry, if it's absent, you would mark it as none. If even a single of those is present, you would mark it as few. And even and if it's present in more than one third part of the tree, then you would mark it as many. So, for instance, in this particular picture, there are actually no leaves of any type. So, all new leaf, mature leaf, dying leaves are marked as none. There are many buds because buds are present in more than one third part of the tree. There are many flowers because flowers are present in more than one third part of the tree. And there are no fruits because we can't see any fruits. The fruits are green in color or brown in color when they are ripe, and they are quite big. So this is how one would make an observation, and then one would just save an observation on the app. So that's how one makes an observation for season watch. So it's very simple actually. It's a 1 minute thing. If you're used to doing it, it's literally 1 minute or 5 minutes. Yeah.
So, so basically, I mean, if I have to say the different aspects that you need to do in season, I mean, in making the season watch work is you need some researchers, which could be formally trained scientists, plus the citizens who decide what we should observe, like which trees one should observe. Is it like any tree in your backyard or particularly one kind of tree? Then you need to also figure out how long you need to observe that. Is it like 1 month, 1 year, 1 decade, whatever that time span is? Then you need people who will be able to train other people to run the initiative or run the awareness campaigns. And you also, because you use an app, you also need somebody who develops the app for you.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And
Yes.
then when you get all this data, you probably also need help with analysis of all this data. How does that run? Who runs that analysis for you?
Well, at present, it's the team. The season watch team is comprised of researchers and IT team. The
Mm-hmm.
IT team are the ones who develop the app and the website. The
Okay.
researchers, we are also in charge of training other people, ensuring that the data comes in, and then also collating and analyzing the data.
Right.
Some of us even go out and like do a lot of outreach with individual schools to ensure that they are trained well and they bring back the data in.
Mm-hmm.
So at present, the same people who are also doing the training
Mm-hmm.
for new joinees are also the ones who are doing the analysis,
Okay.
looking at the data.
Okay. So people who gather data for you generally do not analyze it for you.
Not yet, but we want people to actually take up the data and start doing their own analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So, but people have requested us for information on trees as a reference. So, for instance, somebody wants to start a project on phenology and they don't have any information on the phenology of that species.
Mm-hmm.
They request us. So, can you, from your data, what is the phenology, known phenology for the species? So,
Mm-hmm.
that those kinds of requests we've had, but
Mm-hmm.
we haven't had any citizens analyzing these data yet,
Mm-hmm.
but
All
we
right.
welcome. So anyone who is a data geek can please write to us and access all this data and have fun with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, one last question before we move on to the audience questions. Given that you are today among us to discuss the climate change challenge, can you please tell us, Geeta, what are the different things one can probably keep an eye on to look at the changing climate? Why I ask you is because in our climate change challenge, we do want people to think of what different things in their surroundings they can study through initiatives like citizen science to understand the changing climate or the impact of the changing climate. So, does this need to be only living things? For example, you're looking at trees, which are living things. So, and we understand that life does get impacted by changing climate. So, is it only living things that we can keep an eye on? And if so, which are these kinds of easy to watch living things? Or can we also keep an eye on the non-living things or some abiotic parameters around us? What do you think, Geeta?
So there are living things is the easiest thing, I guess, to observe because we are surrounded by living things and there is enough documentation, enough help around to help us recognize what these living things are. And if you also know what about them to watch, it's very easy to report. No, non-living things, there are of course citizen science project based on astronomy, I think, star watching.
Yeah.
There are also some very local citizen science projects based on geology.
Mm-hmm.
I think people also monitor water quality at local level.
I see.
So, yeah. So again, it's driven by what is the requirement of the people,
Hmm.
right? So, if the requirement is that we want to know the ranges of species, then we want to do it at a scale at which that will be apparent.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it's more about the question rather than what people can observe.
Right.
So Yeah, so if the
So
question is something that can be,
far-fetched to then say that if people want to observe anything, we can actually develop a means to watch it through citizen science in some format or the other.
absolutely, absolutely. So, for instance, like a question that somebody could ask is if the river flowing through my town or my village, if the pollutants in that are affecting, crops that grow downstream of that. So, this is a perfectly valid question that can be addressed by citizen scientists at that scale.
Mm-hmm.
So it might require citizens to go out, collect information on affluents that are being put into the river. Might some information could be how fast the river is, what is the rate of flow of water in the river, how does it change with seasons. Then the third could be a measurement of how crops are faring downstream of the river versus upstream of the river to make that comparison. So this is a very valid citizen science question because it's a query that is relevant to those citizens at that scale, which
Right.
is whether the health of my water body is good or not.
Right.
And information is collected by them and analyzed by them to
Hmm.
understand that system better.
Okay. So I mean, your river example was very interesting. So if I now say that okay, with changing climate, I want to see if the health of my river is getting impacted.
Mhm.
Um, so what are the different kinds of things I can do to to evaluate the health of the river? Is it the water quality? Is it what is growing inside the river? Like what? How are the fishes doing, or some other living things doing? And how long do I need to keep on monitoring it to make a, a wise estimation of anything?
Right. So you have to monitor it long enough that, okay, so there could be things like seasonal changes, right? So if I were to monitor a river in June, July at
Hmm.
peak monsoon versus if I were to monitor the same river in December, January when it's really dry, the
Hmm.
river itself is so different, right? So
Hmm.
in order for me to understand that actually a change in the river is because of climate change and not because of what is happening within the same year because of season, I
Yeah.
need to have enough number of seasons recorded,
Hmm.
right? So I would have to do the same exercise again and again for many years,
Hmm.
such that the difference that we see in the river is actually because of climate level changes and not because of some other shorter scale changes.
Hmm.
So again, that is something that has to be decided by the people collecting the information. They have to make an assessment about actually how long information is required for something like this. In the
Hmm.
case of plants, I can safely
Yeah.
say we need decades and decades of data. We need decades
Okay.
and decades of information. Just
We're
one
talking
or two
about like say
years.
20, 30 years of information that you need to collect, or more than that.
Yeah, 20 years of data is good.
20
20
years.
years of information is good because you would also have an idea of how the climate changes. You would have an idea of how plants themselves behave in the same year,
Mm-hmm.
and you can sort of then try and separate the two when you think about what is causing that change.
Nice. Okay. Cool. So that discussion really, I hope, helps our audience also to now start thinking of how to think about citizen science initiatives, and especially the initiatives which can help us make a comment on if that impact is actually because of climate change or not. So yes, all of you out there, it's not like 2 months data or 2 weeks data. We're really talking about 2 decades of data, 20 years of data that we need to keep collecting. So it, of course, requires a lot of patience. But then that's what citizen science is. We are talking about collective power of all of us coming together. And that's why the need of all of us coming together to collect that data and analyze the data. So now let me put the Google form here again for all of you to start thinking of what will you study in your local surrounding to look at the impact of climate change, or to just look at how climate is changing. And I've put the link already in the Google form, so start filling it up. And in the meantime, Rahul, can you come online and take up the audience questions from YouTube and ask Geeta?
Turn off my camera. Turn off my camera. Yeah, just a second.
Yes.
In the meantime, if you think that the audience will be interested in looking at some results from season one, we can look at some of the other following subsequent slides to this.
Can you tell me again, Geeta? I couldn't get you.
Sorry, I was just saying that in case the audience would be interested in looking at some results from Sales and Watch, I
Mm-hmm.
have
Oh,
slides
yeah.
on that.
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah, here we are.
Right. Okay. So actually, everyone's favorite tree in Season Watch is mango. Most people can recognize a mango tree, and most people know when it's flowering and fruiting. So it's one of those trees that we get lots of information on. But interestingly, the sources that I mentioned before that are available on the phenology of mango do not really capture that. It shows different phenology at different latitudes. So this we were able to see in season watch data itself. So if you just look at this is just four maps going from December 2018 to September 2019. Yeah, we did these BioBlitz events where on the same 3 or 4 days in the month, people were asked to go out and observe trees. And we got lots and lots of trees. And these are the patterns for mango flowering in the country. So the first map, all the gray dots are all the trees that were observed across all four BioBlitz events. And the yellow dots represent the trees that were showing fruits,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in December, if you see, fruiting is restricted very narrowly to the southern part of India. By
Mm-hmm.
March, fruiting has expanded across peninsular India.
Mm-hmm.
By June, you see it all across India. And then by September, again, it has shrunk back to the very tip, very southern tip of India. So, this is a great way of understanding that the same species, mango, which everyone knows behaves very differently across the year, depending on what latitude you are on. So, this is
Mm-hmm.
an interesting observation that we were able to make using season watch data.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to the next slide, we also are able to capture lots of time related patterns, temporal patterns in species using season watch data. So, this is the cultural reference that I was talking about. This particular species, Indian laburnum, has a lot of cultural importance in Kerala because it is associated with a new year over there, which is Vishu. And Vishu, for as long as it's been known, usually comes in the third week of April, second week of April, between 13th and 15th of April. So it's a really lovely cultural reference. It's a static date, and every year it comes on these dates. But Malayalis have been noticing that Vishu, this Indian laburnum, which used to flower along on the same dates as Vishu, is not flowering on the same dates as Vishu. So
Mm-hmm.
it's flowering before.
Okay.
So we tried to understand whether there was some weight to this, and
Mm-hmm.
we next slide, please. We looked at all the trees that were recorded in Kerala, and over a period of 6 years, looked
Mm-hmm.
at whether flowering had actually shifted
Mm-hmm.
from the Vishu date to
Okay.
sometime earlier. So in this graph, I don't want you to worry about the light gray line, the light gray curvaceous line. That's just where any tree was flowering, in flower, right? Okay. I want you to look at the vertical gray line, which indicates the date of Vishu on average across these years, and the black line, which indicates peak flowering in this particular species. So if you notice, the percentage trees or the peak in the flower, most percentage of trees which were in maximum flower in the past 6 years was actually just before Vishu. It was a little bit before Vishu, and by Vishu, that number of trees which were flowering had dropped down, showing peak flowering. So this actually the data sort of indicates that what people were observing was actually true. It's something that they can easily observe in their own backyards. Uh, why this shift has happened is something that we want to explore now. Is it because of increasing temperature? Is it because of changes in monsoon patterns? All of these things we have to now explore. This is just the basic pattern describing that there seems to be a shift in when Cassia fistula flowers in Kerala. So, yeah, so this is how a cultural baseline has helped us detect a change.
And this project basically was initiated by the localites there who thought that the flowering pattern was changing.
Yes, so they thought that this flower pattern was changing, but we used season watch data to sort of
Right.
find out whether that
Correct.
statement had any weight, and
Correct.
it seems to be corroborated.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, so these are a couple of results from season watch, which I thought are exciting.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Rahul, do you want to take up the questions from YouTube?
Yes, not too many questions, and I think that's testament to what a wonderful and easy to understand talk this was. It's truly fascinating, and thank you. I think a couple of ones which were in the chat but have already been addressed, which was Citizen Science website, and I guess Season Watch is one example of that. And maybe another question which sort of came around was to sort of talk about whether the data is standardized, or how do you make sure that the data that is collected is in a standard format. Is that something you could talk a little bit about?
Sure. So, like I mentioned, when we talk to people about how they are supposed to collect data, we train them in collecting data a certain way. So, the rule of thirds is the standard way of collecting information on leaves, flowers, and fruits. So, anyone who's contributing data has to follow the thirds rule. So, which is one way that we ensure that data are standard, like everyone's collecting data the same way. But many people also ask whether we have ways of checking for errors, as in, like if we have ways of checking that what people are reporting is accurate or not. So again, we sort of ensure that the training is good enough that people don't make mistakes as such. And in the future, we also plan to have certain types of checks within the database itself, where potentially erroneous or potentially incorrect observations will be flagged, and the contributor will be able to correct it on their correct it by themselves.
Great. Thank you very much. I think that was should answer the question. I think what you are doing is truly fantastic, and I'm guessing a lot of students who are attending this or watching this would be now keen to see how they could contribute to, say, efforts of Season Watch or so on. Is there something you could just talk a little bit about how an individual might be able to contribute, as well as how could a school potentially contribute to your efforts?
Right. So like it's a three-step, very simple three-step way of contributing to Season Watch. The first step is to register. If you're an individual, register yourself as an individual. If you're a school, register using a school ID and register as a school. Once you register, you will be able to now add trees that you can monitor. So you would need to sort of go near the tree that you want to monitor over a long period of time. Record what species it is, record its location, and give it a name. We have had such fun names as Voldemort and Harry Potter and all kinds of things that are given to their trees, and it's a really fun thing to think up of a name for your tree. Once you've named your tree and registered it with Season Watch, all you have to do is visit it every week. Spend 5 minutes looking at the tree canopy based on the thirds rule that I just spoke to you about. Measure the leaves, flowers, and fruits. Record that on the app or in a notebook, and you can put it in on the website later on, and you just upload it. So the three steps are register, observe, and upload. So anyone who is interested can do these three things to get started.
Thank you. That sounds easy enough. And do you all require a photograph to be taken with a smartphone because that can potentially give you a GPS location as well?
So if you're using a smartphone, the phone directly detects the location of the tree if you're standing close enough to it. So you don't really need to take a photograph. And we plan to have maybe photograph contributed a little bit later, but not right now. We don't have any means of contributing photographs as observations.
No, but this is quite fantastic because it could be so helpful in government efforts of the tree census, which in many places takes a very long time. Of course, to have citizens involved, students involved, and by maybe taking these photographs on smartphones, also have a GPS location coupled with your platform, it becomes something which could be very, very useful, and our students will definitely contribute to that. I think just to follow up as a final one, somebody asked if AI tools can be used in such an effort. Is that something you all are looking at in the future?
AI, interesting. Actually, can this person also elaborate in what way they would think AI would contribute to this?
I think it's just a question about saying is AI part of some of these things, but my guess is it's one way in which when you take a photograph and you have a huge database, let's say, then can we automate the process of recognition of the species and leaves and what stage in the phenological process your particular species might be, something like that. Tie it in with weather data as well. But I think it's a little bit in the future, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Although, the one reason why we want people to do an observation themselves and not just contribute a photo is
Yeah.
because when you meet a tree again and again, a tree that you've given a name to,
Yeah.
you sort of form a special bond with it. And you want more to take care of a tree that you know so well, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, from the point of view of data and information, AI sounds great. But if we also have a goal of bringing children and people closer to nature by ensuring that they go out into nature every week. They go out and meet a tree every week. So
Yeah.
that bit will be lost completely if we're all AI dependent.
Yes.
So yeah, I guess it's a call that maybe somebody in the future might take.
Yeah. And I think just to follow up a couple of questions which are about how do you prevent any incorrect data being put on the website or the database?
Right. So yeah, so there are a couple of ways in which we prevent that. Firstly, so many people are ask us the question, how do you know that the tree that is being entered is correctly identified or not? So we have actually a list of tree species which are typically culturally important. They are widespread, widely planted in rural and urban areas in India, and they're easy to recognize. And we have sort of a photo reference for species on our website. So the list and a small description of the species is provided on the website itself for cross reference. So incorrect inaccuracies we hope are limited because we are restricting our species list to easily recognizable culturally important plants. And secondly, like I said, we do a lot of effort in training the people at the training stage itself, so that the way the data is collected is consistent and there are minimum errors in that area. And in the future, we plan to build in some automated data checks so that if there is a potential misreporting of a phenophase or of a species, then it will be flagged immediately, and the contributor can have a chance to rectify it.
Thank you. That sounds quite robust. And so I think those are most of the questions from the YouTube chat itself. I think from my side, I would certainly congratulate you on such a fantastic effort. Can I just ask to keep such a fantastic effort going for 10 years now? I'm sure you've had a lot of citizens contribute, but it's obviously the blood, sweat, and tears of your team. How big is the core team which has started this and is managing it?
Okay, the team has undergone quite a few changes in the past 10 years. But typically, the team is not more than five people at any given time. So it's usually been five people at any given time. And we have had two tech team members since the beginning, and they are the ones who have set up the website and our app, and they are the ones who maintain our database. And three other people usually are contributing to training workshops, to collecting information, maintaining social media, all the other jing bang. Typically five people, yeah.
That is all the more impressive. So I think, I hope, Geeta's experience will inspire students. You all will see that, such a fantastic effort, and, of course, there are contributions from students like yourselves and citizens, certainly. But, a fantastic effort which is growing year by year, with five members. So you all should be inspired to do projects like this and take it to a large scale itself. Right. So thank you, Geeta, from my side. It was most wonderful listening to you, and I'll hand it over to Somdatta now.
Actually, sorry, just to add to that, it's the five of us are here, but we reach out to schools and individuals across India via partners. And without these partners, it will just not be possible to do something at this scale. So,
Correct.
for example, in Kerala, our regional partner is Mathrubhumi,
Yeah,
Mathrubhumi Guru, and they have Eco Clubs program on Seed,
I
and they
see.
take season watch to all of Kerala schools through the city program. And they are
Yeah,
also in charge of, doing the outreach and the training in that particular state for the entire state. So,
yeah.
without partners such as Mathrubhumi, this is an impossible thing to do. It's just not possible.
Yes. No, I think when the effort is so wonderful and it's, so impactful, of course, people are happy to partner as well. I'm just hoping that students get inspired by your example and, think that setting up such platforms does not require, a huge team or so, but maybe people who would like to follow their sort of passion and goals. Thank you very much, and I'll give it to Somdatta. Right?
Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Rahul, for moderating the questions. So, Geeta and Rahul, for both of you, we had asked our participants what kinds of parameters they would like to study and observe to understand climate change in their local context. There are quite a few interesting things that have come up, and I would be very happy to share with all of you. So somebody wants to look at temperature data, precipitation, local geography, and weather information. Somebody else wants to look at how climate change is affecting the bird population in that area and the pattern of precipitation in that area, the population of earthworms in the area, monsoon starting date over years, color of leaves of big trees in the area. So these are some of the ones that I think were very well formulated already in terms of what they want to see, and probably, I mean, I can see how they can be easily related with climate crisis. There were
Absolutely.
also a few entries which were very broad, where they said that they want to look at living things, local surroundings, and climate, or they want to look at the city, but they haven't mentioned what exactly. But I hope that this conversation today will also give them enough meat on understanding the nuances of it and pick something in particular to look into detail. There's also one entry where I would like to take the opportunity to clarify a bit. There's somebody from Tamil Nadu who says that this is an industrial area with coloring and dyeing units, which cause lots of water and air pollution. So, looking out for ideas where the effluents can be treated in an efficient and cost effective manner, which is great if somebody is interested in thinking about and studying pollution. But at the same time, I wanted to bring it up because often people confuse climate crisis and pollution. So whoever did this entry, I just wanted to reiterate that in climate change challenge, we are trying to look for ideas around climate crisis. Pollution is a huge problem, a very important problem, and needs to be also dealt with. It's just that please do not confuse climate change and pollution together. I mean, often they go hand in hand. They can be found, both of them can be found in one place together, but one climate crisis is different from pollution. So let's be just clear about that. Yeah, so with that, I'm very happy with how many different ideas people have already got uh, to look at in their own surroundings to understand climate, and that is all thanks to you, Geeta. Uh,
That's wonderful.
yeah. So, so with
And that
that,
was really fast because people just came up with all those ideas right now.
yes.
That's amazing.
So now for our participants, I hope you all remember that. So there's a clarification which came up. So they say that the factory damages trees and herbs, and that's why they wanted to look at it, which is which is again like what I said that they often go hand in hand together. So if you are damaging the trees, then of course then the CO2 increases, then it's a valid problem. So yeah, I mean it's important then how you justify the problem in the realm of climate crisis. Um, so with that, I'd like to close the session. But before I close, I want to remind all our participants that the Climate Change Challenge has its entry submissions open and it's open till 13th of December. So it's actually one more month that you have. And though today was the last expert session, we wanted to end the expert session today so that people have enough time to formulate their thoughts and put up really nice, interesting entries for us in the challenge. Um, Please do take advantage of all the expert sessions that we have had so far. For example, today's session, I'm sure, would have led to many interesting entries that are probably going to come up under the category of research, um, on research on how to study climate change. And I'm also hoping to see many interesting technological ideas on how you might want to deal with climate crisis in your local surroundings. So so yeah, I mean, the challenge is all up for you now, and we will be looking forward to it all. Thank you, Geeta. Thank you, Rahul, for being there for
Thanks a
all
lot.
the times that I needed your help. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Samrita.